ABC, national broadcaster, is supposed to be balanced. Instead, it repeatedly attacks me and other Sky News hosts for being sceptics of the global warming scare, which is its religion. You take its Media Watch show. It has attacked Sky News skeptics in 4 of its 5 shows last month, and yet again last night, twice. Media Watch host Paul Barry was particularly cross last night.
And while we're looking at Sky News and climate, we're delighted to see that its commentators have found a new hero.
Professor Andy Pittman from the University of New South Wales.
Professor Andrew Pittman.
Professor Andy Pittman.
Yes, Sky has fallen head over heels for a climate scientist. And how could that be? Because Professor Pittman recently said something they loved.
This may not be what you expect to hear, but as far as the climate scientists know, there is no link between climate change and drought. Now, that may not be what you read in the newspapers and sometimes hear commented, but there is no reason a priori why climate change should make the landscape more arid.
Now, that seemed pretty clear to me, but Paul Barry says Professor Pittman, a global warming warrior, had since changed his tune slightly.
So, does Professor Pittman actually believe there's no link? Well, no. Because last month, before Sky really piled on, a clarification was issued to say the professor had left out a crucial word.
Andy fully admits he should have said there is no direct link between climate change and drought.
Yes, no direct link, but there's still a link, says Pittman, telling Media Watch.
Do hotter temperatures lead directly to higher evaporation and a higher risk of drought? No. But does global warming lead to changes in rainfall patterns that can lead to drought? Yes. This indirect link is clear.
And expanding on that link by telling us...
In some regions, this increases the risk of drought. In other regions, it decreases the risk.
Now, contrary to what Media Watch implied last night, I'd never seen that clarification, which I actually think was Pittman being embarrassed and covering his backside with Paul Barry's very active and willing help. You see, Media Watch last night left out the rest of the Pittman comments that I'd quoted. It left out the bit that emphasised that Pittman did not, in that talk to his fellow warmists, raise any link at all, any, between global warming and drought.
If you look at the Bureau of Meteorology data over the whole of the last 100 years, there's no trend in data. There is no drying trend. There's been a drying trend in the last 20 years, but there's been no drying trend in the last 100 years, and that's an expression of how variable the Australian rainfall climate is. The fundamental problem we have is we don't understand what causes droughts.
Not less rain, and we don't understand what makes drought. So, for all of Paul Barry's talk last night of global warming causing droughts in some places and floods in others, how could anyone really know whether man's emissions are causing any of this? Pittman certainly doesn't know what stops rain. You heard him. And when I talked to the Climate Council's Will Stephen, who's a real alarmist, back in 2011, he couldn't see any pattern either.
You're absolutely right. There is a lot of uncertainty about rainfall change, how it's going to pan out around much of our continent. We've had very severe droughts before, so again, we cannot attribute this drought statistically to climate change.
Media Watch. Joining me is Gerard Henderson, head of the Sydney Institute, columnist with the Australian newspaper and author of the Media Watchdog blog. Gerard Henderson, thank you so much for your time. What is Paul Barry up to?
Well, I think Paul Barry's up to last night what he's been up to for quite some time. Essentially, he's preaching a number of messages, and currently it's climate change and drought. And he has other messages that he wanted to preach. And so he's got 2 kinds of messages at the moment. He's got political messages, and then he's hostile to Sky News. So those 2 of them very frequently go together. Now, as I've said before on this program, Rupert Murdoch's Fox News in the United States is actually, or it's called Media Buzz in the United States. That program runs, and it's very much a program where different opinions are expressed with the compare. But with the ABC TV, Paul Barry is just one of a series of left-wing presenters, and he runs a left-wing line every week, and this is just the latest line he's running, and there'll probably be another one next Monday as well.
Yeah, but it's gone beyond correcting errors of journalism. It's gone to patrolling bad opinions. I must say, by the way, that he accused me of turning a deaf ear to a correction, or not really a correction, a sort of cover-up, in my view, by Andy Pittman. I never saw that text. So how could I be deaf to it when it was never drawn to my attention? But anyway, it seems to me, like I say, he's now patrolling thought crimes against the ABC's religion.
Yes, well, I mean, last night, for example, if you were going to report that matter professionally, you should have given everything that Andy Pittman said, and not simply a kind of cut version of it, because he made it very clear when he was talking to this group at Sydney University, I think it was, that they wouldn't like his message because his message was not consistent with the message of the eco-catastrophist. And now he's slightly qualified that position. But Paul Barry didn't make that clear. I mean, he's got a political agenda, and one of them's on climate change, and there are others. But that's not supposed to be the role of Media Watch. The role of Media Watch is supposed to be to examine journalists and the media. It's not supposed to be to proclaim political causes. But with Paul Barry, it's a bit like a kind of secular Sermon on the Mount. Every Monday, he just goes away and preaches. And occasionally
it's quite extraordinary.
He's on a rant.
It's quite extraordinary. And here's a taxpayer-funded organisation that's meant to be balanced, attacking Sky News because it offers some conservative voices among non-conservative voices. It's really quite extraordinary.
And
I want to show you. Sorry, yeah.
And then well, then it runs the line that no one watches Sky News, but all it ever does is analyse Sky News. So Sky News must be pretty important. If Paul Barry, and I think he's got Paul Barry, and he's got an executive producer and 8 staff for a 15-minute or 12-minute program, and they're forever looking at Sky News, which I think is some kind of a compliment to you and the team after dark, although he never has a go at Darren Hinch, I note, so there you go.
It's just so extraordinary, his obsession with Sky. That really is quite something again. I mean, when you think there's Channel 9, there's Channel 10, there's Channel 7 for him to get on with, there's the ABC's bias he could start calling out, there's all the print media, etc., etc. And yet program after program is about Sky News. The Guardian, how about that? The New Daily, the Conversation, the BuzzFeed, or so what's left of it. Why this obsession, this absolute week-in, week-out obsession with Sky?
Well, I can only think he believes, and I think in this instance he's correct. I mean, I think he believes that Sky News has substantial influence. And to be important, you don't necessarily have to have huge numbers, though you've got good numbers, but to be important, you've got to be influential. And often people repeat things they heard on Sky News, even if they haven't watched it themselves. And that's a sign of real influence, when people who haven't seen you are actually talking about what you were talking about. And I think Paul Barry regards Sky News as some kind of inhibitor to the political agenda he feels Australians ought to share, which is the kind of the conservative free zone agenda which he would meet when he meets all his colleagues at the ABC and Ultimo whenever he goes in there. So I think in a sense it's a kind of compliment to Sky, but it's a sign of obsession on Paul Barry's behalf. And you look at the Australian yesterday, Chris Mitchell put together just in a couple of paragraphs the various agendas Paul Barry's had just over 2 months, and it's just one issue, one left of centre issue to a left-wing issue to a left of centre issue to a left-wing issue, week after week, and the taxpayers paying for this.
Absolutely, just as the taxpayers are paying right now for a Media Watch staffer to be listening to my very words right now and transcribing it. And a message to you guys, you're doing it on my money, and we've got our eye on you. Gerard, as I mentioned last night, you on your Media Watchdog blog, out every Friday, called out global warming preacher Lenore Taylor, who's editor of The Guardian in Australia. You called her out for hypocrisy because a Canberra home, which she is now selling, she's not in it, so no one need worry that I'm being, putting her life in danger. It's got an energy rating of just 1.5 out of 6. Now, you actually were on the ABC's Insiders with her on Sunday. Any reaction from her to that? Well, I think my announcement that her energy rating was 1.5, in other words, this is an emission blowing out house, her response to that, I think, was
rather cool, you might say. But we had a courteous relationship, as I always try to be courteous, as you know. But
I do.
But she didn't raise the issue with me. But I thought I should do something about this. So I sent off a note to Greta Thunberg because I want to get her kind of feeling. Because here's one of the leading eco-catastrophers in the country, Lenore Taylor of The Guardian, and she's got this house which has got a rating which is just a little bit above 0, which is a dreadful rating in Canberra. And I thought I should find out what Greta thought about this, and she sent me back a note actually by pigeon because we have to conserve emissions here, and here it is. I should read it to you. I said the question was, how do you regard Lenore Taylor's house with all its emissions, and what do you think of Lenore Taylor in view of this? And I got this note back by pigeon this morning. It's very small. It says, from Greta, Lenore Taylor, how dare you?
Well, I think she'll take that with embarrassment and shame and do penance. You know how they used to buy indulgences in the Catholic Church before Martin Luther came along? I think she'll plant a tree or something.
I don't remember it, but I'm aware of it, yeah. Yeah, that'd be good.
Thank you for that reproach. Thank you so much for your time, Gerard Henderson.
All right.